Hey there, White Sox fans. Well, who needs February? February. We're back. It's March. There's been a lot of podcast news. We're going to touch that right at the top of this podcast here, but I'm here with Melissa Sage-Bollenbach, she's come with notes, so I might just hand the microphone over to her. Super Joseph Reeses, as always, representing the Indianapolis field office, about to get new digs, but we'll talk about that in just a second. And of course, Jordan Haas, who has admittedly watched less spring training baseball than Melissa, but we'll iron all that out in a few minutes. Up top, I'm Brett Valentini, hosting still. They haven't kicked me off yet. But on that note, Vox has sort of kicked us off. Technically, we're not supposed to be doing Vox podcasts anymore. The deadline got delayed. You might have heard, they axed some sites like our brothers and sisters at Second City Hockey. And they also axed a whole bunch of podcasts, including ours. We are not going to be affiliated with Southside Sox for much longer. We still are. April Fool's Day is the target date to switch over. Something tells me it's going to happen a little more quickly than that. A lot of other stuff will come out about that. I haven't really put together a post together yet, but I figure as long as you're actually bothering to listen to our podcast, because we're back, the four of us, we made a special effort to come back and talk to you about White Sox baseball. And because of that, I figured I should at least acknowledge the fact that, yes, we are soon to become Sox Populi. That is going to be our umbrella of podcasts. That's the mothership now. All your favorite podcasts. I guess there's only a couple that are still active, but in theory, there are a dozen podcasts that could be dragged over to Sox Populi with us. We will recharge the Patreon and do some special stuff there. We will still be able to promote the podcast, or at least put the podcast player on Vox, at least until they decide to change their minds, because they're a whimsical bunch. But in essence, nothing should really change for you as a listener. However you're listening now, you'll hear us still. Really, nothing will change. So this is almost a formality that I'm explaining all of this to you. And we may have a podcast just devoted to all the changes, because the Fans First Sports Network, which we're joining now with another 20 or so baseball sites, about 50 plus sports sites in general, is going to be doing a lot more interactive stuff, site to site. We didn't do a whole lot of that at Vox. We don't do a lot of that with Vox. But, before the Crosstown series, we'll probably talk with Sarah Sanchez and some of the Cubs folks. Or, if the Cubs are doing well and we're not, we don't want to talk to them. But at any rate, there's going to be a lot more crossover, crosstalk, interplay, national podcasts. We've got at least one member of our team who's going to be doing what would be considered more of a national podcast, even if it is more under our umbrella of Southside Sox. And I've also reached out to some non-Southside Sox affiliated people who do White Sox content, and they may be coming sort of under our umbrella, even though we may have, almost token interaction with them. We'll see. There's a lot of things happening. Oh, I don't know. The timing couldn't be better, given that opening day is just whatever, a month or something away. Other thing probably needs to be brought up at the top of this podcast. Probably most of you by now have gotten the news about the lack of punishment for a certain player on the White Sox, and it is bizarre to not really want to be able to, or not be able to, because we're not really going to talk about 20% of your rotation, or 1/25th or 26th or 28th of your roster, but I don't really want to. And so, other podcasts probably will, even under our umbrella, but this mothership, at least at this point, won't, unless it's the celebratory DFA, and that will be a special 2-hour episode. And I zestfully look forward to hosting that podcast. I cannot wait. I hope it's tomorrow. I hope I can just ditch this podcast, even though I'm sure you're very entertained, and do the special 2-hour DFA podcast. I cannot wait for it. But what we're going to talk about here, given the fact that we got baseball rolling, the White Sox have done fairly well. I definitely think there are some bright spots that we've seen on the team, and probably also some weaknesses revealed, or guys that we expected to maybe do better right out the gate who haven't. So I'm going to just throw it out to the field, or maybe just hand the microphone permanently over to Melissa and get an idea. Let's start positive before we go to ad break. And ad break that is still paying Vox. Love you, Vox. And before that, let's go good news for women. We've had a whole off season of bad news. Let's talk good news for once about the White Sox. There's some really cool things that have sort of developed in just a week or so of baseball. I'd be curious just to go around the room here and maybe get maybe the favorite thing you've seen so far about the White Sox play, or the buzz around the team, or whatever. And the one with the notes, I think it really it's owed she is owed. First crack at it. Melissa, out of all of the 100 or so points that you made about how good this team, how excited you are about this team, what's just jumping out at you as a number one? What's got you excited?
Well, I guess the fact that I've enjoyed the hustle. Like there seems, when I've been watching or listening to the games, there seems to be a lot of like energy. And I mean, we have 13 stolen bases, which I believe I read last year in the whole of spring training, we only had 9. So we have 13 already, and it's like 5th in all of the teams. So to me, like that's really exciting. Like that shows that they're, I don't know, just kind of taking a different approach than maybe we did last year. And also, I guess there are some guys on offense who are like on fire, which one of them being Oscar Colás, which is super exciting because, you know, he was kind of told that he's going to be our right fielder and we didn't really know what we were going to get. And so I think there was a lot of us that were super skeptical of what he was actually going to be able to bring. And again, it's spring training, and, you know, you can have a perfect spring training and have an awful season. But I mean, I like that we're seeing good things from him. I mean, he has 7 hits. He has a stolen base. So I'm excited so far what he's brought.
And he pulled an Eloy today.
Yeah. On the other hand, that's for the second half of the podcast.
That's the negative part, Jordan.
Hey, he's not hurt. He just ran into the wall.
That's true. That's true. That is some resilience that we haven't always seen in Eloy. So that's true.
But really, anyone probably has thicker bones than bird-boned Eloy Jimenez.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. I mean, Colás looks like he could be a football player. I mean, the guy is really big, but he did wince when his hip went up against the wall today. And I was just like, oh no, he's down. It's awful. It's starting over again.
Yeah, and he from the start, upon being, you know, he was this sort of advanced professional. He played in Japan already, so he wasn't really this like true rookie. And from the start, he was talked about as being a right fielder. And then last year they stuck him in center field. He was basically primary center fielder, and he pulled it off. He acquitted himself pretty well. You gotta like maybe potential, let's say, average center field ability in right field with the White Sox. That's nuts. This is good news. Super Joseph, what was jumped out at you?
Well, Yasmani Grandal's play has certainly been something that I've really enjoyed seeing so far. I mean, he had no power whatsoever last year. And that was, in terms of just play of individual players, that was just way below what was expected. I mean, he very well may have been number 1 on that list last year, but I mean, it's only been 12 plate appearances in spring training, but he's slashing 500, 583, 900. I mean, like that'll get the job done and then some. I mean, so I'd say like he wins the MVP honors of this first week or so of spring training so far. And I don't know, like with as far as options in the middle infield, yeah, I mean, Eric Gonzalez has hit pretty well so far. I mean, I would say if he gets a lot of playing time at the major league level this year, that's probably a bad thing. But I mean, they don't have a whole lot of depth at second base. I mean, they have Andrews and a bunch of guys previously who were fighting for the starting spot who were not good or probably weren't really ready for a starting job in Major League Baseball yet. So I mean, yeah. He's been off to a hot start in spring training as well. So I mean, yeah, those 2 players, could potentially provide a spark that I personally wasn't expecting to see this year.
Jordan, they brought stats. I think we're in trouble.
Okay, Jordan, I'm not going to ask for like snapshots, or I'm not going to ask for slugging percentages, but just observation of the team, vibe, anything.
Well, I like that they brought Elvis Andrus back because we didn't get to talk about that on the sort of podcast, and seems like a good deal. Even if he's half as good as he was last year, that's still probably better than any second baseman we had last year. But outside of that, I mean, in general, the pitch clock seems to be kind of nice. It is spring training, and it's still kind of slow. I wonder, I mean, there are always the detractors and things, but I would enjoy not having to write about a 4-hour game every so often as much as it happens. But outside of that, Billy Hamilton, love seeing Billy Hamilton back too. He brings an energy that it seems like is affecting the entire team positively, which I like. From the 3 innings of baseball I've watched and the clips I've seen on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, going back to that stolen base conversation we're having real quick, it's interesting. I wonder if that's a product of new coaching and new approaches, or if it's a product of the new rules as well too, because it's like we've got so many things that are going to help facilitate stolen bases now that I wonder how many we're going to see from us this year, especially when we've got a decently fast roster.
Yeah, I've made it very clear that Billy Hamilton should have 200 stolen bases this year. I've made it pretty clear that the rules are there to be exploited. They are not going to be the same rules next year, because I think the game, in a delicious way to me, is going to be bastardized. And I think Billy Hamilton is going to be a very, I'm saying Billy Hamilton, but that type of player, maybe a guy who can get a base a little bit easier than Billy Hamilton. Sorry, Billy. That type of Elvis Andrus, who already did he even get caught? Like he got caught like once out of 25 or something last year. He was excellent last year. He should not get caught this year, and there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to run backwards and steal 50 under these new rules. I did have a little back and forth with JJ Cooper, Baseball America, who pointed out to me, because of course I'm just dismissive, like, oh, well, it's the new rules. There are going to be 8,000 stolen bases this year, and he did point out that in spring training generally you do see more running. For whatever reason, guys trying to dig to make the team, or just bad. A guy who's a shortstop playing catcher. I don't know, what it is necessarily. And that always does go down a little bit. But then, I've sort of fought back with the research that, I did in the minor leagues last year. And that is the success clip was enormous in the minors last year, playing under these rules. The frequency, it wasn't just the success, it was the frequency of stolen bases and even attempts did make an uptick. So maybe this bubble that we see in spring training that always sort of falls back down to earth in the regular season might not be the case now. But I'm going to throw it out to the field here. Having a first time and a first year manager in Pedro Grifol, and a guy that we've sort of heard and suspect is maybe getting some guidance from the front office, not necessarily a yes man per se, but certainly willing to listen. Does that make him more or less willing? I mean, I guess we can just defer this to Rick, but it make him less or more willing to maybe try to exploit those rules, maybe try to game the system. Whereas Tony Russo would be like, stolen bases are, I don't know what he feels, good, bad, whatever it is. It wasn't going to change if the rules changed, right? He's like if he woke up in the morning. Is he going to be more hesitant as a first year guy to try to maybe exploit some rules and even go with the strengths he has a feeling for, maybe because he's afraid Rick will say no? Or do you think because it's like, hey, I may only get 1 year, I may only get 6 months. Let's go for it. What's your sense of maybe what a first year manager would do with the White Sox?
I think Rick has built this roster to be both, kind of both speedy and powerful, and the power has kind of diminished, at least last year. Just could have been the ball, could have been a million other things. But I think there is enough speed on this roster that if Rick doesn't recognize it and isn't like actively passing enough to Pedro, and if Pedro isn't recognizing, being like, hey, Rick, we should do this, we should steal more bases, especially with these new rules, it's a missed opportunity. Because under the old, analytics would say, at least under the old rules, that stealing bases wasn't super beneficial or whatever, because you're trading out for a base. But now the fact that the probabilities are higher, it's like you've got to assume that there's at least a little bit of more of a push, not just because he's new and there's new rules, but because it's a team that can do it too.
Let me interrupt. I want to get Joe and Melissa's thoughts too. Joe, the book says it's like 72% success rate. Then sort of makes, is that the breaking point for a stolen base? It depends
on the situation, but it's normally right around the 70% mark. It depends on like how many outs there are and how many runners are on base, but yeah, generally right around 70%.
Okay, and Joe, your thoughts about whether Pedro might be more willing to try to exploit or experiment, or is he going to be more conservative?
I feel like he'd be more adventurous. That would be my lean. I don't think his mindset is that I might only get a year or two to do this thing, and Yeah, like hearing the way that Han talked about him as he was introducing him, I kind of felt like he was very, very happy to be able to make this hire. And with that in mind, I think that he'll probably be very receptive to different suggestions that Han has, and I guess that's one of the few upsides that Han has, is that he's more analytically sound than most people are in the organization. I think
is the lowest bar ever, but I love that you gave him that phrase, Joe. That's beautiful.
But yeah, that's my gut. I don't think he'll be super conservative with it.
Yeah, that's fair to say. I mean, that's a good point. And here's the thing, we don't know. I mean, I'm not sure if terms were really announced at all. The White Sox are really great. I mean, remember they gave Ricky that like they didn't even announce that they gave him an extension. They gave him an extension. Pedro could have like 5 years. He could be like, you want to pay me for 4 years and fire me after a year? That's cool. I'll sit home and eat popcorn and get paid. I mean, we don't even know what his contract is. I mean, it could be a year. I doubt it's a year. 3 years maybe. So I mean, he can probably manage with some abandon, knowing, hey, they're on the hook for at least a couple of years. I have talked to Ricky. I know how this organization works. Melissa, your gut on whether he's more inclined to be conservative or adventuresome in, given that these are his first major league games.
Just kind of the vibe I've been getting, just listening to some of his interviews during spring training and things, that he's definitely willing to look out to do things outside of the box and not, an old-fashioned baseball way. So it's kind of like Tony La Russa on one end, and I feel like he's almost on the other. And as long as it's not disastrous, I think Rick will go ahead and let it play out for a while anyway. And so I think, especially in the beginning, I feel like he'll have the ability to maybe push the envelope with different things and test out how the new rules are going to affect everything. And there probably will come a point, if it is awful, but I think at the beginning anyway, that he'll have a lot of leeway to kind of do what he wants to do, going on what Joe was saying about Rick being so excited and almost giddy with Pedro's selection. So
I like this optimism. I could see our win total predictions just moving upwards into the upper 80s and the 90s. It's beautiful. Let's talk about one more, I think, pretty clear positive that I'm going to bring up before we break and maybe go negative like we like to do here and there in the second half. And that is the bullpen. The anchor is not there. Obviously, Liam, get well soon. Keep on fighting. It's great that he's been around the team a little bit. We've seen him even throwing some, so that, that's wonderful. But that's your anchor, and that could easily throw a bullpen in disarray. And I don't have the numbers like Melissa or Joe might have in front of them, but my sense is that the team hasn't missed too much of a beat. And again, we're talking about a week of spring training, and there are guys whose names you may never see again in a White Sox box score, or certainly wouldn't on opening day, because you're just throwing arms out there. But the fact that they, and Kendall Graveman has been awful, so that would be sort of the next guy after Hendricks, who you'd say, okay, here's a veteran, of course he's doing the World Baseball Classic now, but he can provide some stability. Well, he didn't do that, but yet this bullpen doesn't seem in any way like it's a disaster. I mean, that's a feather in Han's cap, and it's something the White Sox seemingly have done pretty well year after year, is managed to sort of churn out some bullpen arms. Sometimes guys disappoint, like Aaron Bummer may never pitch again. His arm is, always hurt or not working well, but for every one of those, it does seem like the White Sox managers just sort of like cobble together 2-3 guys who you're sort of surprised by how well they do. And even a guy like Jose Ruiz, who everybody punches down on some. I mean, he's managed to stick in major leagues, not just the White Sox have had a good pen, I think, most of these years he's been with the team, and he's there even if he's the last guy there. So has the bullpen surprised you? Are the numbers telling me that I'm a clown and I shouldn't really be hosting this podcast, and I'm doing a bad job here by saying that it has been a positive early on?
No, you're right on, Brett. Way to go.
Oh my goodness, I get to live to host one more podcast.
Yes, like Foster, Kelly, Raylo, Santos, Ruiz have all looked really, really good. Really good, like no earned runs, strikeouts and things like that. Graveman has really pretty much been the only one that has been ungood, and he's been really ungood. But Martin hasn't been that great either. Then Stever got the boot today.
Yeah.
So, but the guy, those core guys that we're going to rely on have looked really good. So that is also a huge plus and really exciting to see.
I don't know. I also watched Jimmy Lambert give up like 3 home runs in an inning versus the Angels the other day too. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah, the bullpen is, I mean, again, credit to Rick Hahn. He built the, most expensive bullpen in baseball for a reason, that it can handle, the best closer in the American League going out with, the terrible disease that is.
Except none of the expensive guys are doing anything.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but I am on the hashtag Raylo for closer train for the time being, but because he seems like he's been pretty good, and he's held down the fort for years now. I mean, he's been here almost longer than anybody. Might as well give him a shot to see what he can do. But bullpen's not going to be bad. I don't think. I hope not. Kind of need them to be good.
I was one to hate on Diekman big time last season, and he's looked really good too. So I mean, that's a huge plus. German is the
German
guy. Yeah, he's also looked really good. So I mean, I think there's been some kind of sleepers there too that were unexpected. So
I mean, I'm not saying I said Gregory Santos was our number 9 prospect coming into the season. I'm not saying that, but I did. So Gregory, keep throwing well, please. Make me look like that I don't have to give up hosting this podcast. Joe, your vibe on the bullpen is falling in line as well, that you're generally impressed without Hendricks and Graveman.
I'm surprised. Yeah. I mean, they've been playing well, and I think that's overall there was enough talent in there to hold down the fort for the foreseeable future. And I mean, yeah, we'll see how it pans out when they face full lineups where they are not facing just random like spring training invitees. But I mean, yeah, I could see this unit operating at a high level even without a couple of their top performers.
Yeah. And it's a topic maybe for another podcast, another Vox or FSM podcast. And it would be picking Pedro's brain to see whether, I mean, he hasn't said this guy's my closer. So, I mean, would he be willing to do a little closer by committee, dicey leverage situations? I mean, that would be very interesting, and I would be very encouraged in his managerial instincts if he was willing to maybe not go by the book, like, I don't know, Tony La Russa. And, I mean, whether that means picking the hot hand, being willing just to, go matchups. I don't know what that is, but some sort of closer by committee would be intriguing. It's not necessarily the answer, but it would be intriguing if he was willing to do so. But like I said, sorry, I just threw it out there because that's a podcast for another time. We need to take a break because Vox needs to get paid. And we're going to come back and talk maybe about, some of the things that have been shadowing the team. There's nothing. Now that we cleared up that stuff at the top of the podcast, there's nothing that we should be disappointed about when it comes to the White Sox. So let's continue just a slightly more muted take on the first 7 or 10 days of White Sox spring training. Right after the break, we'll be back after Vox tells you something for a minute or so. Hey, White Sox fans. This is Side Sox Podcast number 137. We can still call it the Side Sox Podcast. You can't do anything about it. We're not changing the name yet, but we will. And if you're just tuning in because you're always bored with the first half and you just automatically skip to the second half, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you might benefit from rewinding and getting a little bit of the information we gave you at the top, because things are going to change with the podcast a little bit. But get to that when you need to, because I know you relish hearing Southside Sox staffers diss the White Sox. I know you love that. Nobody ever in the comments says you guys are being too hard on the White Sox. So, okay, let's give the people what they want, crew. Things that you would consider, aside from, again, the obvious, things that maybe been a little disappointing. Again, this is very early, so we certainly can't lose our heads about really anything on this team. And that goes for on the good side too, even though we're going to pretend that the good stuff's all going to stick all year. And this is a 95 win team. There's some bad stuff or some, worrisome stuff, I suppose. Again, I gotta go back to the top of the board and go to Melissa there with that stack of notes because I do not want those to go to waste. Something that's troubling you maybe most still about the team nagging at you, Melissa.
Oh boy. Okay. The one I will pick is I'm going to pick two, but I'll be really fast. The defense. So they've had 11 errors in 9 games. Not great. I mean, spring training is the place you work out the kinks and things like that, but still it's kind of a lot. And then the other thing is, we did have a positive run differential until today, but now we're -1. But we have only scored 43 runs, which is like the second lowest in all of the Cactus League, which is also not great. So while we've had some folks on fire like Eloy and Colás and Grandal, there's also been a lot not on fire like Benintendi, Moncada, Buyuri Garcia, and TA. So so those are kind of my two that Eloy's been a singles machine. He's been hitting well. He's got the most hits on the team, but they've all been singles. So there are still those few things that are kind of from last year nagging at the back of me in terms of scoring runs and not being a defensive disaster.
Yeah, I think I saw Jordan tapping her mic saying, was this thing on? Because I did say you guys had a lot of power and slugging, and you're not showing it. Yes, the offense has been woeful. And in fact, it's a recency bias says that it's actually a normal offense because, boy, the first 5 games, they even score a run. It was woeful to begin spring training. Maybe they're starting to pick it up, and this is the real offenses we're going to see. But as Melissa just pointed out, there are several guys that are like, okay, come on. You only got 4 more weeks before it sort of starts. So please start. Joe, things jumping out at you that are, well, they're not keeping you up at night because you're not that silly, but bothering you about this team?
Yeah, I'd like to see more power from Anderson. We saw right around May 25th or so onwards, he was essentially a replacement level player. And a lot of that had to do with he was slapping a lot of singles and had roughly a 250 average. But, when you're batting right around 250 with not a lot of walks and not a lot of power, that's just not going to be a very good player. So far, he's 3 for 15 with 1 double so far in spring training, which isn't great. And I feel like for the White Sox to make a big run this year, it'll be difficult for them to do so if he's not playing at a high level. And there's also, I don't know how much playing time Romy González is going to have, but before they signed Elvis Andrus, it seemed as though they were leaning towards him being the starter at second base. And nothing I've seen so far in spring training would even come close to justifying that. Just both ends of the ball, both on at the plate and in the field. He has not quite looked the part of a starting second baseman yet.
It has been a rough spring. Okay, listen, crew, I use a lot of words and I often don't use them right. I think I'm going to use this word right, but don't laugh at me when I don't. I think I want Tim Anderson for every one of his aphorisms. Every time he decides to post something that's mystical and aggravating and curious, every time he does that, which I think is a lot, I want a home run. That's fair. That should be the deal we have with Tim. We're going to read your weird ass tweets. Just get some spaghetti that, night or the next day. Okay. Seems fair. More power from Tim. Jordan, what is it?
What I've seen, there's 2 things I don't like, and they're mostly probably just the, results of it being spring training, but I still don't like them, is Eloy in right field and the weird ass lineups with Andrew Benintendi hitting third a lot and Grifol saying he likes him there for the time being, and I'm like, nobody else does.
Yeah, and didn't he also say well, I'm not gonna tell you why? He's there's some reason
he's being very, very I don't want to say shifty, but very secretive about it, and I'm scared that means that he's gonna be the permanent 3-hitter with basically no power. It's you just swap him and Luis Robert and you'll be fine. Or Luis Robert Jr. now is his preferred name. But
I like now we don't have to debate whether it's Robert or Robert or Robert. Now we just say what, just as long as we get the junior.
yeah,
He's making it easier for us.
Now he's like just junior. He's trying to be Ken Griffey.
Stay healthy, young man. Stay healthy. But well, and remember, Grifol, he may have palmed some files from the system. He may have that secret Kansas City intel that will tell us one day why Andrew Benintendi should be a number 3 hitter. Boy, if the offense is that bad that he's a number 3 hitter, I think the win total estimates are now going down. See, look, second half we promised it was going to be a little more depressing.
Andrew Benintendi in the 3-hole all season is a 65 win projection.
That's metrics. You can't argue that. That's metrics. No doubt about it. Okay, we may have missed good or bad. We got a little time left. Other things we may have skipped or people we should mention. We covered a lot, but good or bad things we've seen.
Well, Hans or Alberto has been doing really well, and then Leori Garcia has not. So I'm like, how, if he continues, if Alberto continues to have a really strong spring, how do you justify keeping Leori in that role as the utility guy when he's playing like crap and you have somebody who's playing really, really well? It's like, I just really hope that the Sox are not hesitant to just DFA the guy. Like, if he's not performing at the end of the spring, if he continues to have a bad spring, just cut him loose, let him go and give it to the guy who has earned it. So again, it's early, but so far that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and the rules, now hold on, they're on the hook for like 12 million more to him, right? I mean, they owe it to him if no one picks him up, right? And they owe it to him minus the minimum if someone does pick him up. So they're sort of on the hook. But if nobody wants him, and who would want him? He goes to Charlotte and they just pay him a lot of money, right? Unless and then they can they can outright, they can just say no, just go away, or he could still stay in the system and just be paid a lot. Am I wrong? Or well, all right, let's pretend that's the case. And if anybody knows better, don't laugh at me in the comments. Just pretend that I was making a very obscure point that was just too esoteric for any of us to understand, including myself. So I'll shut up now. Yeah, way to bring Leori Garcia up. That was in your notes, Melissa. Come on. Now I'm depressed. Man, we only got 3 minutes left.
This is the bad part. This is the second half was the bad part.
Yeah, really.
So of course, Leori Garcia is going to show up.
Yeah, we spent like 2/3, getting all excited about the White Sox. What's wrong with us?
He did hit a home run, so maybe like game 3 home run will carry him. Maybe this one spring training home run is going to carry him.
Isn't this cute that you just did that? Every time he hits a home run now, which I admittedly is probably not much. Every time we're going to mention the fact he hit that massive home run in the ALDS, it's like, he's going to have 5 more career home runs, and every time it's going to mention that, hey, remember that home run he had that went 450 feet in the ALDS? Well, that's what they can put on the statue when they erect the statue in about 7 years. Okay, now it's getting really grim. All right, well, let's wind this thing up. We will definitely do more podcasts under the Vox umbrella because, as predicted, again, if you listened to the start, I don't blame you if you didn't, but go back. If you didn't, what are you doing skipping around our podcast? Come on, it's not going to make any sense to you. We are going to be moving on from Vox podcasts, but that estimated March 1st start date has been pushed back by Vox, and we're going to see whether or not the FSSN network they're a part of can punch back and get that moved up. We are likely to be doing opening day podcasts under the Vox umbrella. I don't know. It's a toss up. This is weird. Maybe we're going to have to do 2. Maybe the already arduous amount of work we do on opening day, which is like pregame podcast, postgame, we're going to have to double it. Crystal will be the alternate host, or Joe will be the alternate host, or Miss will be maybe we'll do like 4 podcasts. All right. Multiplicity coming to a podcast soon near you. It's Side Sox Podcast 137. Thank you, Melissa, Super Joe, and Jordan. Appreciate you having with me. Hey, listen, who needs February? Who cares about February? It's March now, and we're doing podcasts. We will be back, I promise this time, sooner than you are ready to have us back. We'll be back to talk more White Sox baseball, good and bad, very soon. Thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you again very soon on the Vox LLC network.